Alright, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and today we will be covering Game 7 of the 1886 World Chess Championship match between Wilhelm Steinitz and Johannes Zukertort. So, we are in a situation where Steinitz is down 2 points with the black pieces in this game. However, he won the last game after losing 4 in a row. So, the momentum is coming up Steinitz in this game, so Zukertort will be looking to either stabilize and not concede another game in a row, or to bounce back, get another victory, and really seal the deal for the match, and try to get the win. So we have this position, we have d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6. This is the first time in this match that Zukertort has not played a Slav. Instead he went for the Queen's Gambit, declined, Queen's Knight variation, and then we have a transposition into a Tarrasch defense here. So Steinitz switching it up, realizing that the Slav defense has not worked very well for him. He's -1 with it so far in this match, so he decided to go for a different defense, the Tarrasch defense here, which is a very confrontational defense, personal favorite of mine against the Queen's Gambit. Just a very confrontational defense for black that allows a lot of activity for black in exchange for a few positional weaknesses. So we have knight f3, knight c6, we have a3, we have d takes c4, bishop takes c4, c takes d4, e takes d4. So now white has the isolated d-pawn, which of course means that this is in fact a semi-Tarrasch, though according to chess.com we've transposed into a variation of the Caro-Kann defense. So that's fun, I guess. I'm not sure that these players would have known that they had done so. I don't know if the Caro-Kann existed at this point. So we have bishop e7, we have short castles by both sides, bishop e3, just adding a defender to the d-pawn here. We have bishop d7 from Steinitz, queen d3, setting up the battery with the queen and bishop here, also taking control of this diagonal with the queen. We have rook c8, very nice, rook ac1, just competing with this rook for the control of the c-file here, queen a5, I'm not actually sure what purpose that serves because there's no pin and this pawn is not very weak. So I have no idea why the queen's out there. Again, it's a nice active square, I suppose, but I don't know what the future prospects for that queen are. The bishop comes back to a2. We then have rook fd8 from black, rook fe1, trying to take control of the e-file here, and successfully doing so. Bishop e8, opening up this rook, adding some more pressure to the d-pawn, also pinning the d-pawn to the queen to open up e5 opportunities in the future. We have a nice bishop b1, just adding some pressure to the h7 pawn. Not immediately going to be a threat, but I don't know, bishop g5 might be played, trade off the knight. This knight obviously cannot ever move because you blunder a mate. So we have g6, just avoiding any of the headaches that could arise from having such a weak h7 pawn, just blocking the battery from doing anything. We have queen e2, doubling up on the e-file and removing the queen from this pin, so thus preventing e5 from being an annoyance. Bishop f8, just preventing the bishop from coming to h6, and also taking control of this diagonal, and possibly he intends to play bishop g7, which indeed he does, just fianchettoing the bishop. We have bishop back to a2, so this is already looking quite bad for white because he's moved this bishop an awful lot. The bishop came to c4, then to a2, then to b1, then back to a2. He's moved the bishop 4 times in 18 moves. That's about like every 4.5 moves. So knight e7, queen d2, setting up this battery, going for bishop h6 in the future probably. We have queen a6, which the computer does not like, likely because there's no real reason for it as far as I can tell. You don't pressure anything, you're not really threatening anything, you're not threatening, I mean, I guess you take control of this diagonal, but that doesn't really, it's not particularly consequential. So we have bishop g5, pressuring this knight, knight f5, adding some pressure to the d4 pawn here. We have g4, just some crazy stuff. The knight takes on d4 here. We have knight takes d4, and e5, which works because the knight is pinned to the queen with the rook. Now, in this position, the only move that keeps an advantage for white, that gives white an advantage, as you can see, white has a slight advantage, is knight d5. This is a brilliancy. This is also the move that he played, that Zukertort epically played. This is a brilliancy, because as you can see, this knight is attacked twice. This knight also hangs. However, if you play knight takes d5 here, the bishop takes the rook, and if you take this knight as well, then obviously this rook hangs. So bishop takes the rook. If you take the bishop back, then white plays knight c2, and this knight now ends up pinned, and white will win that knight in the future. If instead of this you take this knight, then knight e7 check is played, followed by king h, followed by computer suggests king h8, but king h8 or king f8, the result is the same. You take the rook on c8, the rook takes and you take back. Or, I mean, even here, you can, I guess you can take this knight, but then the king is checked and the rook is won regardless. And if you play this, then queen takes. Oh, apparently not queen takes. If you play this, then yeah, you just back up with the rook, and the king is in the center. Queen takes is a threatened checkmate, so that's not going to happen. If you take this knight with the rook, which might seem like a decent idea, then the rook is taken by the bishop, and black is suggested to take on c1 to trade off this rook so it doesn't become a liability. But you would have rook takes c1, queen takes c1. This is just the engine line. I'm not very smart myself. So bishop, the knight takes d5 here. Queen comes to c8, pinning this bishop, threatening to win the bishop. Obviously you can't take this because you just kind of lose. After bishop f8, the bishop comes to h6 and you win the game. So, in this position, instead of doing any of that, Steinitz trades off the c-rook, and we have queen takes c1, which now the position is that's an inaccuracy. It's not a complete throwaway of the game, but he should have played rook c1. I'm not sure why he didn't. That's just the more natural move, but maybe Zukertort wanted to be a little edgy. So we have that, we have e takes d4, and then we have rook takes d4. So, Zukertort has managed to play a brilliant move, play a brilliancy, an absolutely beautiful move in this position with knight d5 that I wouldn't even consider unless the engine were in front of me. Just an incredible move, and then he completely has gone into a losing position in 3 moves because he messed it up. We have knight takes d5, rook takes d5, rook takes d5, bishop takes d5, and the engine says this is losing, but it's not too awful for white. I mean, obviously, the g4 pawn is now a huge weakness for Zukertort, but that might not become too big an issue. Steinitz, however, ensures that it does become an issue by playing queen e2, going after that pawn, after the g4 pawn, and also forking these 2 pawns, and he's going to win one of them. So h3 is played. H6 is played, just kicking the bishop out. Bishop c4 is played. Now, in this position, according to the computer, Zukertort has bishop e3 as an opportunity to equalize the position, and he's worse, but he is not losing here, because if takes, then you play queen b1. If takes with the bishop, you play queen b1. And you pin the bishop to the pawn on b7 here, and the pawn on b7 will in fact hang. So you're not actually ending up down a pawn. However, he does not play that. He plays bishop c4, which is a very logical move. It's a tempo, danger levels. He watched Gotham Chess. However, in this instance, Gotham Chess has led him astray. So the queen comes to f3. Now everything is hanging. The h3 pawn is weak, the f2 pawn is weak, this bishop is still hanging, everything is just looking really bad. So he plays queen e3, which would be an okay move. He would only be slightly losing if Steinitz decided to trade queens here. Steinitz is a big brain master, and so he does not decide to trade queens. Instead, he plays queen d1, beautiful move, just gaining a tempo, and then he wins the bishop here. But he doesn't even care. He doesn't even care. He's a Giga Chad. He does not even care about winning the bishop. He goes for checkmate, and yeah. Zukertort is just completely lost here. You know it's bad when the engine is telling you to just straight up sack the bishop for absolutely nothing. That is the best move in this position, is to sack the bishop for nothing. In order to get queens off the board and then suffer in this endgame where you're down a piece for a pawn. Now, in a blitz game, you might be able to draw this. At my level, I may be able to draw this with white if my opponent is a little bit silly, but of course this pawn immediately hangs. You're down a full piece. I mean, I don't see how you draw this. You may be able to create some kind of difficulties for your opponent, but it's not really a position that you draw down a piece. Unless you're at like the 600 level. If you're at like the 600, maybe up to 1000 level, there's always a chance for you to draw this position here. Because frankly, your opponent probably doesn't know how to win this endgame. But anyway, we have bishop e7 here, and we have Steinitz's own brilliancy of bishop e5 check. Which, again, beautiful move. Because if you take the bishop, which was not played in the game, so I'll show you what happens. We have queen h1, check, king g3 is forced, queen g1, check, king h4, or king f4 is a main one, so you can't play that, so king f4 is forced, queen takes f2, check, queen g3 is forced, we have g5, check, bishop takes g5, h takes g5, and king takes g5, and you hang the queen, you're down a queen. Again, maybe in a blitz game, maybe in a bullet game, you could possibly draw this, because I do see some chances here of bringing the h-pawn up the board, getting the king trapped in the corner. But if your opponent has anything more than like 3.5 minutes left on his clock, you're going to get destroyed here. And your opponent, this is the 1800s, your opponent probably has 3 hours left on his clock. So bishop e5 check is played. We then have f4 by Zukertort, and as you can see, there is now a forced mating sequence. We have bishop takes f4. The only move is queen takes f4, otherwise you blunder a mate in 1. Queen h1 check, king g3, queen g1 check, and Zukertort resigned because king h4 is forced, and then g5, well no, not g5 check, because you can sacrifice the bishop and get some actual counterplay, but queen e1 gets on the board, queen g3 is forced, and it's the same idea. You play queen takes e7 check here, g5 is forced, queen e4 check, queen g4 is forced, queen e1 check, queen g3 is forced, h takes g5, and if you want to protect your queen, come here, but queen a4 check, and now you have this position where you're getting mated on h5. And so after queen g1 check, Zukertort resigns the game to Steinitz. So Zukertort loses with the white pieces. We now have 2 wins in a row by Steinitz, and the point gap is closed from 3 points to a mere 1 point in the span of 2 games. Kind of an insurmountable, seemingly insurmountable lead that Zukertort had built up just disintegrates in 2 games thanks to some great play by Steinitz. Coincidentally coinciding with when they changed venue, so you know, maybe there's some Hans Niemann anal beads going on, but I imagine this is 1800s. The only anal beads that they had at the time would have been hemorrhoids. So, we have a resignation from Zukertort here, and Steinitz closes the gap to 1 point. So that's the game. If you enjoyed, please do like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you subscribe, dislike if you dislike, comment if you comment, and check out another video of mine if you feel like doing so. Yeah, thank you. That's it for today. Have a good one.